Hello, it's Dr. Garth Fisher on The Cutting Edge, and today on our program, we confront a crisis that thrives in the shadows, human trafficking. It's a global plague, but also a local one, which is happening in our cities, our suburbs, and even in our schools. Few have the courage or the training to fight it head on. Our guest, Rob Mott, is one of the few. He's a U.S. Army veteran from the elite 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. His career was disaster relief, humanitarian missions across the world. He has sacrificed, he's worked in Hurricane Katrina and Ukraine's battlefields to Americans' own streets. He's delivered aid through disaster, and now he's channeling the same warrior's resolve into rescuing children from predators. Through Operation Guardian and DarkHorse benefits, Rob and his team deploy special operations veterans, advanced surveillance technology, and military-grade expertise to empower law enforcement and strike directly at the heart of child exploitation and trafficking networks. This is not awareness, but instead it's real action. Rob is here not just to tell you what's happening, but to challenge us to open our eyes, our hearts, and maybe even join the fight. This is a conversation that might unsettle you, enrage you, and above all, might inspire you, hopefully. So, Rob, thank you for coming. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to get the word out for you. And first thing is, tell us the difference between DarkHorse benefits and the Guardian initiative.
So DarkHorse benefits is the parent 501c3, of which we have 4 different programs. Operation Guardian is one of them, in addition to our humanitarian assistance and disaster relief in the Ashley Furniture Tempur-Pedic program called Operation Shut-Eye, and then a special operations veterans entrepreneurship incubator small business development program.
Okay. And I know that, your military career, that kind of shaped your desire to do this. How did that happen?
Honestly, from a pretty, an injury in training, prevented me from finishing my career the way I wanted to. And, I was in the 160th SOAR, which is a great aviation unit that supports some of the most elite special operations teams in the world. And it was just gave me a good chance to, you get exposed, you see other countries. I think most Americans are a bit entitled because they've never been to a country where, just running water is a big deal, not having to, do your laundry in a river or something. So I think that just seeing how bad things can be outside of the U.S., I think, while in the military sort of drove me to want to do something better. And then when Hurricane Katrina happened, I'd already been injured, and my military career had been disrupted. And when Hurricane Katrina kicked off, when that happened, hit Waveland, Mississippi in 2005, that was our real first call to action, and delivered. I've had some of my teammates I have a construction background, and we were building some custom homes in Florida. So I brought some of my framing crew members with me, and we took the morning that the morning after it hit, we loaded up 3 rider trucks full of food and water, medical supplies, Pedialyte diapers, diesel fuel, and everything. We self-deployed up to Waveland, Mississippi, using really, it sounds odd, but just the same principles. When there's no street signs and there's no GPS and there's everything was destroyed. Just using basic land navigation tactics, and
It's a war zone.
Yeah, it was a disaster up there. Like Hurricane Katrina was pretty rough to see people go through that in our own country, and I think that really was the birth of DarkHorse, was just disaster in our own backyard.
Right. And you used other experiences. You were, I think you were in Ukraine. Tell us a little bit about that. When the war broke out with Russia.
So we did. We saw that my day job. So I don't take a salary as the founder or CEO of DarkHorse. So my day job is I have a company where we train special forces, special operations troops, and one of those programs is a pretty intense tactical medical training contract with one of the special operations branches. And a team of us, DarkHorse has been doing, great things responding to other natural disasters and a couple of our guys said, "Hey, man, we have to do something to help these people." I mean, I'm old enough to where I watched the original, Red Dawn. So I do believe that Russia is the enemy.
Right.
And our team just thought that, hey, we should help. We should help out where we can. So I took a team of special operations medics in, some, PJs, a SARC from the Marines, a Green Beret, a SEAL medic, and a Green Beret medic who you've met. And they were crazy enough to go with our plan of, we went in 3 weeks after the war started, and ended up down in Odessa through some relationships we'd had, that they just said that's where the need was most for tactical medics. And when we got there, a general, he gave me the speech about, because we thought we were going to go directly to the front lines and support with, combat medics. And he gave me the speech that I'd heard, plenty of times in church about teach a man to fish, feed him for life, versus giving a man a fish and feeding him for the day. And he convinced us that staying and training his medics that had been yanked off the street. I mean, Ukraine had to multiply their military by 200 times the size that they were overnight. And they were pulling people off the streets, putting them in a uniform, pushing them to the front lines with really no training, because they didn't have the time to prepare. And so we started running their medics who had zero medical training through a 1-day course with us, and we trained 640 medics inside the first probably 45 days. And I think
in the face of danger, I must add.
Yeah, there was some pretty good, there's artillery and rockets and drone strikes, and being Americans that far south, and that close to the Eastern Front, we always kept in mind of our environment and where we needed to go if we had to get out of there. But our hosts were great to work with, in Ukraine, the teams that we worked with, and I really feel we've been given a lot of accolades there, but I do feel that we saved hundreds of lives by being able to train them. And what we take for granted in special operations is just having a medic, that's able to do transfusions and all of the complex medical tasks that our guys can do because they're so well trained. And just them not having simple first aid kits, like an individual first aid kit called an IFAC. There's no such thing over there at the beginning of the war. So, and then that led into, I think, one of our most impactful missions, where we evacuated 254 civilians out of a town on the Dnipro River that had been essentially cut off, and there weren't any other nonprofits, or what's called NGOs is what you get called over there, as non-government organizations that could, and the Ukrainian army had to focus on the fight. Mm-hmm. So they were not able to get the people evacuated from the zone. So we were the only NGO that had a team of guys with, we had some great guys with special reconnaissance capabilities, and we had satellite communications, and, we knew how to do the things that needed to be done in a bad environment to get the people evacuated. And that was, it was really, being over there was really the foundation of why we got into human trafficking here, was just knowing that, wow, we've really answered the call for some really complex and challenging assignments. What could we do at home as well? And that was how we ended up coming home from one of our rotations and getting into the human trafficking side.
And it's such a good, worthy, venture that you're in. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I think anybody, especially with kids, is just so wanting to help out with this. You just can't even imagine. You can, because you're on the front lines of that. And I met a lot of people in your team, SEAL team members, and a lot of them you can't say who they are. And there's law enforcement, there's Marines, there's everybody that's really highly qualified, and military people, but they're just a solid bunch of good guys that you just want to hang out with. And all want to get this this Operation Guardian, going even stronger and stronger and stronger. I know you're going to make it nationwide. And what was your single moment that you said, I want to, go after human trafficking? What was the moment? Was there a moment that you just thought, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, I honestly, it was a discussion with our team in Ukraine after, doing some pretty good work. Just a couple of the guys had said, hey man, what else can we use our backgrounds and our capabilities and our assets and our enablers for to assist at home, and that really led us down the road into human trafficking and trying to counter child exploitation. And I mean, I think our team as a whole is just a great bunch of guys. I mean, from a military background, I'm the least cool guy on the team. Have just been fortunate to be surrounded by some just great people that are as motivated as I am to help to get the work done. And now that includes top law enforcement veterans and officers as well, that the combination of working with and under law enforcement on each operation has been tremendous.
So can you explain to the audience what's Operation Guardian and what's the difference between other trafficking, counter trafficking organizations? What do you guys do that's different? What makes you special?
I think what makes us different, and there's some great nonprofits out there that do this as well, but it's the line is working working directly for or under law enforcement.
Right.
Versus a lot of the YouTube heroes and Instagram guys are, they're taking the law into their own hands, and that's where vigilante justice takes hold, and that's the wrong answer.
Right. That's good that you have their oversight. So this is probably a longer topic than we can hit right now, but I want to get into in the next segment, what you guys do that's different. You have specialized personnel, you have advanced intelligence, there's cutting edge military technology, a lot of support that's more military, and it's more advanced than what you can get with law enforcement. And then, the mission planning that you've taken from your military background and applied it to trafficking. I know you sent me some, videos of sorts and described some things and showed me some things that, it's really pretty amazing what you guys have been able to accomplish. So when you describe your assets as military grade, what are you using to help the law enforcement with your assets and your background in military?
I think a lot of it is the hardware. It's the technology capabilities of, and which is open in law enforcement. A lot of the metropolitan areas have and utilize the things that we're bringing to the table for some of the smaller agencies. Like there's an app we use called ATAC.
Okay.
That it's on the, operators on the ground are able to look down at their plate carrier, on their Android device, and they have, battlefield situational awareness, where you can see the different drone feeds and what we call ISR, which is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, being able to look down and see where all your teammates are at, which is called Blue Force tracking, or GRGs when each, building is numbered, that's really helpful. And I think law enforcement is starting to migrate now towards using ATAC because it's so helpful for active shooter and other applications. Even the Department of Forestry is starting to use it to fight fires. And so we've been giving law enforcement the training on ATAC and how to use it as part of our working with them and for them on the human trafficking areas. And then our drones being able to stream live feed through ATAC, so that the command center, the Tactical Operations Center, is now able to see. We have flat screen displays that we set up, and so now the TOC is the Tactical Operations Center is able to see everything going on in the areas that we have teams out. And then we have a FLIR ball through our military training company, which is it's a infrared thermal gimbal that's mounted on the side of an airplane.
Wow.
And so when we're not using it to work with the military, then we donate it to be used, to fight the human trafficking operations, because law enforcement is just, there's been such a movement to defund the police, and such a movement to curtail some of their capabilities, that I think we're just trying to support them with what we can. And they have them. I mean, law enforcement is great to work with. I think it's just bringing to bear some of the assets we have that maybe smaller agencies, may not have the budget, to get those assets for this specific mission, because
Right.
they have, as much as we think this is the most important mission for law enforcement, there's murder and homicide and theft. I mean, they have, and I think, a point to get out where people, they try to portray this as, they couldn't do it without you. They absolutely could do it without us, and they're doing a great job. These men and women are really dedicated to the fight. I think we enhance their operations because typically a law enforcement agency's budget is driven by population. You have X amount of people, that means you get X amount of law enforcement slots. Nobody wants to pay more taxes. So that makes it sort of impossible for them to fight every single crime at 100%.
Right.
I think so. We have the luxury, courtesy of our donors and those that are supporting this fight, is we have the luxury to pick this one mission and support them. And I think bringing in some of the more military special operations type assets and capabilities are all hopefully going to help them with the agencies we work with in their other areas too.
Right. Well, I know you talked about murder and homicide. I just think that for me personally, that trying to get these predators of children off the streets is even it's just as bad, at least. And I'm glad that you're breaking down. My father was in the military. You have all these different initials and different things, and I was like, "What is that?" When you read about it, it's like, and then you're breaking it down, showing it what they mean. But thank you for that. So again, this is not a vigilante thing. You're partnering with law enforcement, but you guys have military people, ex-military, and ex-law enforcement that are really good at what they do, that are assisting. And that's, I think, what the edge is on your particular group, which is Operation Guardian and DarkHorse Benefits. How can somebody, we're again speaking with Rob Mott, who's founder and CEO of both. How can people reach you and see where to donate?
There's a QR code on our website, darkhorsebenefits.com, and our Instagram is darkhorse.benefits. And on both of those are easy ways to donate, but also to volunteer.
Okay.
There's lots of opportunities for volunteering as well.
And I'm going to ask you that several times, just so the listeners can all put that down if they want to. Why is it important that you say this mission is so non-political? Why is that an important part of this?
I think because we see everybody tries to politicize things, I believe, to curtail, to work to their narrative. And I think that there's child exploiters, or pedophiles, and those that would do harm to not just children, but adults too.
Right.
On both sides of the political aisle. And I think that when you politicize it, then you negate that other portion of society that would support you and would participate in fighting this fight. So we really try to stay neutral as possible, even when others are trying to push a certain narrative that there's evil on both sides of the aisle.
Right. It's non-political. It's a human issue. Yeah, it's just, I'm so happy that you're doing this. And the equipment you said is military grade. What you're using, those things that you're talking about before, all
right.
Those items. How prominent or prevalent do you think trafficking is in the United States?
It's massive. I mean, the U.S., because of our per capita income is one of the main problems, is that it's a commercial opportunity that for the cartels and organized crime, it's as profitable as drugs or other criminal activity. So
more profitable because it keeps going.
Right. Yeah. Once they lure a victim in, then they have a revenue bearing asset for years.
Right.
And then it just destroys that life.
So, we have the Amber Alert, and I'm in Los Angeles, and mine goes off probably once every couple of weeks. I hear that, and my wife and I went down for an event down in Houston, Texas. This was months ago, probably a year ago, actually. And it was surprising because we're sitting in a hotel in Houston. This thing was going off every 30 minutes, and we thought that's how many kids are getting taken away or something. And down near the border, it was very scary. And then I heard somebody else that stated there's 300,000 missing kids that have come across the border. Is that a number that you're familiar with, or?
I'm not. I haven't really been able to keep up to date on what the tracking is.
It's scary. It's scary. I know that you had talked about months ago that your group had caught this person who was, violating a 1-year-old, which is just, I mean, if that didn't make you want to pay some money and help, nothing will. I mean, I can't even imagine that. I can't imagine there's such a thirst for this.
Yeah, it was really disturbing. Some of the things that you see, and become privy to it's just pure evil of the criminals out there that would exploit an infant.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very small part of the population, and it's a it's a really difficult crime for law enforcement to even find out about. And then, but when they do, and when they do get the arrest for somebody of that caliber, then it's great because they're taking a real animal off the streets.
Yes, that's for sure. What would you say is the biggest misconception about human trafficking and attempts to stop it?
I think the biggest misconception is probably that it won't happen to me. I think that there's chat groups and online forums for pedophiles that they teach what's called grooming. Grooming is the process where you would gain the trust of a child over time, over acts, and attempt to gain they'll gain their trust and try to offset or belittle the trust they have in their own family members, and thinking that it's somebody else's problem and that it can't happen in my backyard is I'd say probably one of the bigger misconceptions, because it can happen to anybody.
It can happen to anybody. Does it happen through like chat? Does it happen through gaming? Gaming devices, things like that, or what's the most common, you think?
I think through the internet. The internet technology, for all of its greatness, has really expanded the opportunities for pedophiles, because they have global outreach at that point, and they can attempt to manipulate multiple children, versus just the kids back. I think in the 70s, 80s, the human trafficking was probably more localized, I would say, because they didn't have the capabilities of being online.
Right. Yeah, that's expanded everywhere, because before you could just go down to Disneyland or go to an arcade and talk to some kid in a corner. But now, it's just so easy to be behind your desk and luring these kids in, like you say, grooming them. And it's just so hard to combat. You probably have a really good cyber guy, too, involved in helping out with this. So how do you dance around, the legalities and the rules of what you can do? I know you had talked about Ukraine's a different thing, but when you get to the United States, there's different things that you can do, or try to catch these people or find them.
The U.S. is definitely the tougher nut to crack because of all of our civil liberties and the protections for the citizens. It makes it difficult. And other nonprofits are able to go out and be more successful in overseas environments where laws are maybe a little bit more lax. It's easier to help support them. And I think an equally important fight is fighting human trafficking and child exploitation overseas. But here in the U.S., which is really what our team wanted to focus on, is saving U.S. children and preventing their harm, which is what our donors and our supporters really want.
Well, internationally, when you're taking those people off the street, it's really helping, the United States also, because there's so many traffickers over there that I'm sure, I don't know what the circulation of this is in the United States or, throughout the world, but I'm sure there's people in Thailand or whatever else that are, here stationed and trying to get those kids. So it's really a worldwide problem. And I know that you're focused now in the United States. You guys are in Arizona. What states are you in now?
We started in Georgia, and now we've done multiple operations in Arizona, and then we have two other states coming up on deck that once we've completed our first operations, there'll be a press release out about those. Right now, we sort of keep it close to the vest so we can maintain some surprise. And and then in the states that we're going to work with are awesome law enforcement agencies that really want to expand their capabilities and fight this mission as well.
Well, if I ask you anything that's like something that's subterranean that you can't talk about, and you just don't tell me anything, because I don't want to highlight any part of your group that would put you at risk or to be unsuccessful or otherwise. Can you tell us a little bit, Rob, how traffickers lure and manipulate kids and get them into these environments?
I think the first thing they do is they try to erode the trust that a child would have with their parents or caretakers is that these pedophiles, they have a lot of online chat groups and literally support groups on the dark web that talk about grooming, and they have grooming standard operating procedures, SOPs similar to what you have in the military and law enforcement. And so the first thing I think that they try to do, which is where parents really need to stay vigilant, I think, is they try to erode the relationship between the parent or caretaker and the child by little things, just subtle, very in the very beginning of, oh, well, your parents don't love you because they make you go to school, or hey, if you wanted to stay at my house, you could eat ice cream any day, any time of day. And I think it's and it's typically, if it's not online, then it's someone close to the child, because parents would typically not let someone around their smaller children. So a lot of times it's somebody that the family knows that is able to, it's uncles or cousins that would have access and placement to the child. So I think that there's a few different ways, and then through shame and guilt, once they get through the grooming stage, and I think that when they're into physical contact, then through shame and guilt and threats and coercion, they're able to keep it up. And so it's often most child exploitation victims don't come forward until they're an adult.
Yeah, and even some of them don't. They're still embarrassed. They don't want to do it.
Yeah, they won't. And literally, I think it's 10% of the United States, over 40 million people, have been exploited in some form or fashion, as a child. So it's a staggering statistic that I think that they're finally getting brought to light.
Well, I heard, don't quote me, but this was probably 15 years ago. I heard 1 in every 3 girls has had some type of experience that was, being exploited by somebody without their consent. And but this is about trafficking and something on a different level entirely. People that are getting these kids and passing them around, and the money's exchanged, and it's so horrible. And it could be your family member. It could be people in your neighborhood. I know there's an app now where it tells you if there's predators in your neighborhood and things like that. And so they're making some progress, but I think you're on the front lines of making some real progress, and I'm really hopeful that that this gets even more successful into your hands. When you're looking at this grooming and using the internet, what kind of technology are they using? Is there what role does technology and internet play in trafficking? I know you said they're using the internet. Exactly how do they break in? What's the scenario where a child is just on the internet and a message comes up somewhere?
All over. And I think in one of the main problems too is, like I'd said back, before the internet was really prevalent in gaming and everybody having a smartphone, in the palm of their hands all day long, it made it more localized. Whereas now they can come through as chat group members, YouTube fans of the same YouTube pages. They can, they're, on the child focused apps and following the same pages that children do. Mm-hmm. And so I think that playing the same video games. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the screen names, that you see that your child doesn't know. I think one of the best, things that a parent can do is, only let their children play games with, kids that they physically know. Right. Because if they don't physically know that child, it might not be a child. And over the course of weeks, months, even a year or so, these guys, and I say guys because I think 99.9% of the predators are men. Right. So that makes it a pretty easy demographic. We just one gender typically seems to be the one that we have to go after, and so you see them slipping into the chat groups and the video games and YouTube forums that the children are watching or monitoring, and that's how I think that's the door that they slip into, for the most part.
It's a formidable challenge for parents to be able to watch this and observe and micromanage, and and then the child thinks, well, yeah, you really don't love me. You won't let me get on my phone and do all these things. It's so hard, and there's got to be a way to coach and train parents too.
Yeah, attacking parents by nature have to be somewhat, there's discipline that, a parent has to maintain. And so I think that's, one of the key ways in for these predators is by attacking that disciplinary relationship that a parent has with a child is that, oh, that's not love. I would never discipline you.
Okay, so without revealing anything that you can't reveal, could you walk us through an operation or something that happened and how it happened and what was the resolution of that?
Yeah, by supporting, being part of as it's been in multiple press releases from law enforcement agencies, is they put together task forces. And part of these task forces, there's multiple roles. It's impressive what law enforcement does to put together these counter trafficking teams and members. They list it in the press releases that members from other organizations hours away will come in and volunteer their time to take part. And a common term would be a sting or an operation that's focused on human trafficking. And our team's role is is for the agencies that
Supporting
allow,
agencies.
the agencies that we're supporting, is to bring in the technology to set up the tactical operations centers, to bring the drones in that provide surveillance, and our ground surveillance cameras that stream through this app I mentioned called ATAC, and to have our we have our airplane up in the sky with a prior A-10 Air Force A-10 pilot and a Army pilot as well, flying to make sure that we can provide containment, to a situation as well. So there's just assets that we're able to assist with to enhance the operation. If we weren't there, they would still do the mission. Law enforcement would still do to still be doing great things. I think that us being able to enhance that is a big assistance for them.
It must make you feel so good when you see something completed that works. That's got to be a great feeling.
It is. It's the feeling in the talk when you see months and weeks of work go into one arrest. A lot of times there's not multiples. Maybe it's just one. And when you're able to, when you know that the suspect has been detained and you know that they're going to receive a pretty lengthy prison sentence, it's better than watching any team score a touchdown.
Oh, I'm sure.
Home run. There's, I think that just being part of it, just doing my part within the organization, is the best feeling you could ever have. Is just knowing that we supported. Right.
Well, and then you can get their computers, I'm sure, and find other people. And once they get in there, they can find other, victims possibly and other perpetrators. There's got to be a lot of stuff that they can access from, arresting these people. Have you had any problems with them going into jail and then all of a sudden they're released the next day? That's been one of the sore points, with people that are, criminals. But have you experienced that?
I think that's, the judge, everybody has a chance to bond out.
Right.
And so the system is so the legal system is so overwhelmed and so overloaded that the cases could take, over a year to get a conviction. Yeah. So I think that it's pretty common to see someone be arrested, and especially if it's their first offense, be able to bond out within a day or two. But then, they're heavily monitored.
Yes, under surveillance.
At that point. So it's a bit, they don't have the freedom of movement that they had before, probably.
And who's actually surveilling them? Like when they're, they get out and they've got an ankle bracelet or whatever they have, who is surveilling, their internet presence and what they're doing? I mean, how do they do that? Do you know?
I don't. We don't do a lot on the post arrest side. That's law enforcement really takes over. There's certain things that as an NGO, as a non-government organization, that we can't support in. And so, post arrest is that's where and the district attorneys and, it's where the prosecution teams take over.
Right. So I know now you're, really supplying people, infrastructure, the technology, that kind of stuff. And I think that you're planning in 2026 also to get rehabilitation assets involved for the people to rehab from these things, these horrible events. Is that what you guys have planned with DarkHorse?
Yeah, that's our goal for phase 3 is to be able to start supporting the victims longer term, the men and women that are coming out of these trafficking lives, oftentimes, and I think that's why we really focused on child exploitation as our core focus now, because that really is a large part is the genesis of victims later as adults being human trafficked, falling into that world, is because they've been exploited as a child. And so they're at greater odds to end up being trafficked later. And oftentimes they're runaways, they've dropped out of high school, they don't have the core employment skills. So really the rehabilitation side was what we wanted to tackle first, but due to a lack of funding, we weren't able to raise the money, to the significant amount of money we needed to pay for a true. The problem with rehabilitation for these women is that they're almost all, the first thing the traffickers do is they get them hooked on drugs.
Yeah.
And
So it's complicated.
And you can't, unless you have $60,000 to $75,000, you can't afford to go to a good rehab that's truly going to break you out of that chain. So
it's expensive, and
it's incredibly expensive. And you're talking about, in a large sum, you're talking about women that didn't really have great employable skills, that they've been trafficked for a long time. They had dropped out of school and things. They were runaways. And so we had a hard time raising the funding that we would need to care and, feed and food and, meals and lodging over a 2-year time period. It was incredibly expensive, but we had a host of volunteers that would help out on the professional side of rehabilitation and recovery. But it was the being able to pay for a long-term sustainable program that ends with them having employable skills. It was looking to be $55,000.
It's the most important. It's probably the most expensive part of the whole process.
It is. The meals and lodging over a 2-year time period is the most expensive part.
Okay. Well, it's Dr. Garth Fisher. I'm here again with Rob Mott. He's the CEO and founder of Guardian, Operation Guardian, and DarkHorse Benefits, and it's he's fighting human trafficking and trying to get child predators off the street. And where can they donate? How can they find you again?
Our website is darkhorsebenefits.com, and then our Instagram is darkhorse.benefits.
Okay, thank you. What's one of the most challenging missions that Operation Guardian has had so far?
I would say one of the most challenging, but also probably one of the most fulfilling, was an operation we did in Georgia, a very rural area in central Georgia, to look like an area that someone, like to catch a predator and things. Right. And there's, when law enforcement's done with an operation, they have a press release and stuff. And so I think that it's not out of bounds to say that, we put a lot of assets and resources into one arrest, where a male, had traveled for over 2 hours from Atlanta to a very rural area in Georgia that wasn't known for human trafficking or any kind of child exploitation. And I think that it was a challenge because we had a very, very small team. It wasn't part of a larger task force. And I think that was probably one of the more rewarding events, because the amount of effort it took us to pull off running all facets of the operation with the law enforcement teams there to get one suspect. But that one suspect, he brought rope and duct tape and drugs, thinking that he was gonna, have physical, contact with, very, very young girl. So it was great to get somebody that's that driven off the street.
So you said that it's not known for this in Georgia, but I'm assuming they're in every city, every country, everywhere. But what are the hotbeds? Is it something like Los Angeles, San Diego near the border? Is it just big cities? Where have you found it's like, wow, these are the cities that are the places that you really congregate?
I think any of the large metropolitan areas, because you have such a concentration of kids, of poverty, of large urban areas. You have a lot of broken families, a lot of single moms doing their best to raise their children, and unfortunately, predators prey on single moms.
What can everyday citizens do to recognize and report the signs of trafficking in their, in a situation?
I think the government has done a really good job of getting the word out on human trafficking. It's in airports, it's in the hotels. There's the things that you can look for. Of you'll have young women with that look nervous, that have a lot of times their handler is really close by, and being dropped off at hotels or spots and then being picked back up, by the same vehicle, same person, for very short durations of time. I think that there's some really good websites out there that the government has sponsored to sort of give some of the signs of what to look for, and just if you see something, say something.
Well, I've also seen on Instagram is where I've seen it where there's a sign where women will like brush by you but touch you, and then behind their back they make a kind of a motion with their hand, clench their fist or something behind their back, and that's supposed to be a sign that they're being taken by somebody that's not under their consent. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
Okay, so
I haven't yet.
what I've seen, and maybe the listeners have seen this as well, but there's people, and I thought this was the universal sign of help, where a woman is with a man, generally, like you said, mostly, and they're walking, and there's a group of people, they're walking through a crowd or whatever, and the woman will reach out and like slap you or hit you without her, male handler or the guy who she's with seeing it. And then you turn around to look while you're walking past them, and then they put their hand behind their back with their fist, clenched like this. And that's kind of a universal sign that a lot of my friends know is like, wow, this person's, been, she's being trafficked or she's been kidnapped or something. And they go straight up to the guy and say, we know what's going on. And I guess that stops that.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'll send you some of those. So how do you ensure your operations that you're doing are legally compliant? I assume it's because you're with law enforcement and they make sure.
Right. Is that every operation that we do is sanctioned, and we're really working for law enforcement at no cost to the agency. We donate our services, and law enforcement's able to do that because, they have a lot of civilian contracted support. They have a lot of civilian positions within the law enforcement division. We had to have our personnel that show up on site. They're being vetted through a law enforcement agency in Arizona, and to ensure that our backgrounds are clean as well. So they're very thorough about who they'll let support in these roles.
I'm sure they're very happy to have you guys. They're probably excited and they welcome you, right?
They do. In most cases, there's we've really developed a great relationship with the departments that we're working with. I think they see how motivated we are to help, and that I think they appreciate the fact that, vigilante works outside the law. And I think that's kind of a big difference. What we do is that we follow every one of the law enforcement guidelines that we need to do so, and working directly under them has been a privilege. And so now a lot of the officers that we've worked with are allowed to take time off to go help educate smaller agencies as we expand the program. So part of what the donations go for right now is actually, because it's really special operations and law enforcement professionals sort of teamed up for Operation Guardian. And so now we're paying the travel expenses for these law enforcement professionals who are really the masters of these operations, going to smaller agencies and setting up task forces in areas that there had never been a task force, that had never. The two operations we have coming up have been are in areas that have never
done this before.
Never done this before.
What are the actual operating costs of partnering with Operation Guardian?
Depending on the amount of travel and assets that we bring into a mission, between $10,000 to $25,000.
Just each venture, 10 to 20 grand, and you got to travel. Food,
airplane tickets,
things,
rental cars, assets. I mean, just the other day we crashed a $8,000 drone.
Yeah, that happens.
Those things happen. Trying to fly in bad wind to give surveillance to the team, right. And if we're always gonna make the decision, even if it's jeopardizing equipment, to support as well as we can.
Right. Okay, so we talked about, the support that the survivors have, following the event and how expensive that is, probably the most expensive of all. That's something in your third phase, you said, of Operation Guardian, right, is to set up all that. And when do you think that would start? Depends on how much money you get.
It really, yeah, it depends on the money. In both Arizona and Florida, we've got some great committees that are, we're working right now to write grants. And, phase one, again, trying to focus on the child exploitation piece, because I think that's in large part the genesis of what becomes later adult trafficking victims. But, we need to raise a few $1,000,000 to build out a facility, to have the right licensures for, medical rehabilitation staff and things.
Right.
But then the goal, we've put together probably 150 volunteers that have volunteered to teach curriculum to the victims so that they can get a job. That essentially it would be a lot of the skills that you would see in an associate's degree is really just skills so they can go get a job that makes them a living wage. Because 99% of the women that are rescued, the recidivism rate is 99%. Almost every single woman that's rescued. And that's really the problem, is the rehabilitation piece, because we work with some other nonprofits that are doing rescues for victims, and they're very successful at getting these women out of the life.
That's all they
temporarily,
know.
But that's
all they know, depending on what age.
And there's a lot of they build relationships with their traffickers as well. These guys have manipulated them to the point where they really think that's their friend, and they're beating them and they're torturing them and they're doing all these things, and they've really confused what love looks like to them. And so it's a long recovery cycle from the abuse and the drugs. And then, but once the problem is, though, that if you fix the rehabilitation problem, and if you can start to repair the mental destruction, is they still have to get a job so they can pay their own bills, or they, have a higher probability of falling back into that life.
Well, at least, that's the hard part for sure. But at least if you can get the purveyors of this terrible, ugly habit to get them off the streets, it's limiting the demand, or, limiting that side of it, so these people aren't trying to get them. How do you handle the emotional weight of all this? Because, you're a hardened guy, you're tough and everything, but this got to hit your heart and make it hard for you sometimes.
I think it does. I think there's a lot of especially the officers that focus on this every day, day in, day out. A lot of them have PTSD from it. They see things that you can't unsee. And I think especially when some of the officers come into contact with the victims, as well as the suspects, I think that's really tough for them to see. I think the text chats and the discussions that you're a part of are, it's really hard to fathom the evil that's out there for people that would do this to children. So
it's impossible to imagine. If there was one message you could give all the listeners out there regarding this subject, this issue, what would your message be?
I think that everybody has an opportunity to help. I think even if it's just remaining vigilant as a parent, and monitoring your child's social media and games that they play and such, to private chefs that would come in and help host an event for a fundraising operation, or we have volunteer intel analysts that are helping us with what's called OSINT, which is open source intelligence. And so I think there's a number of volunteer opportunities would be the message for me that I'd like to get out, as well as funding is just, is helping out where possible.
Yeah. So again, so everybody can hear, you can reach your services, DarkHorse Benefits. How do they reach you? How do they donate?
DarkHorseBenefits.com is our website, and there's a link to donate, which is very appreciated. And then also our Instagram is darkhorse.benefits.
Right. Okay. And on the good side of this, you guys have just had, really great gatherings. I know that you had a gala in Arizona, which was well received, and a lot of people came to that. I know I did with my wife, and very enjoyable. And it's such a great cause to donate to. I don't know that I'd be on the radio talking about donating any other group, but you're somebody I'd like to get behind, and I appreciate all that you do. So this is Dr. Garth Fisher, The Cutting Edge, and we've been talking with Rob Mott. He is the founder and CEO of DarkHorse Benefits, and Operation Guardian, which again is combating human trafficking and especially children, which every parent I think would hit their heart pretty hard. We want to try to get rid of these people off the streets, and you're doing something that's really helpful, and I appreciate that. I lost my voice having a radio show. It's it's kind of crazy that happened, but
I bet.
and actually the first 2 weeks I had this show, I lost my voice somehow, and looks like I'm losing it a little bit again. But anyway, I just want to thank you so much for coming today, and we're going to spread the word, and hopefully more people get involved with your group.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.